It's January. And you know what that means. Goals and resolutions and intentions, or whatever you want to call them. Although I believe that resolutions and intentions are two different things, but whatever. Anyways, maybe you are thinking about your career and you finally want to ask for that promotion this year. Or maybe you want to start that side project you've been talking about, you know, the one that you've been talking about forever. Or if you're like me, you might be thinking about your health. You want to hit the gym a few times a week, drink more water because hydration is so important at this age. Or you're going to use that standing desk so that you won't sit down all day, right? Or maybe you're thinking about, I don't know, finances and saving and spending less and figuring out what the hell is going on with that retirement account. But I hope, I hope that you are also thinking about your relationships. Maybe you want to be more present. Maybe you want to call your parents more often or actually show up when you have plans with your friends instead of canceling at the last minute. I mean, I might be projecting a little bit because I can do that sometimes. Either way, we set intentions for a lot of things in our lives, right? Especially at this time of year. You know, we're thinking about our bodies and our money and work and time. But you know what we don't spend a lot of time thinking about at this time of the year? We don't think very much about what our sex life is like. Like, when was the last time, if ever, you thought about what you wanted sexually at the start of a new year? Not what you think you should want, not what your partner wants, not what some article says would spice things up, because there are a gazillion of those, right? But what do you really want? So, this episode is about setting sexual intentions because they are different than setting other goals. You know, with work or health or finances or whatever, you can just do it. You can control most of the variables, not all of them, but most of the variables. You know, you want to save money, you can set up an automatic transfer. You want to exercise more, you can put it on the calendar, get a gym membership or whatever. But when it comes to sex, sex often, but not always, involves another person. You know, it also involves your body doing things that it might not always, do how you thought. Sex involves desire, which doesn't always show up on command. It involves vulnerability and communication and all the messy stuff that makes it harder to plan, right? So it's not like something that you could just put on a to-do list all the time. Although scheduling sexcapades is never a bad idea, but that's not what we're talking about here. There's this weird resistance to treating sex like something that you can actually be intentional about. And part of that is because we have this idea, mostly romanticized through movies and books and such, that sex should be spontaneous, that it should always happen without thought or planning or conversation. But that's bullshit. Everything in your life that matters requires intention, and sex is no different. So today we're going to talk about it. And in the interest of transparency, I'm going to go first. I'm going to tell you mine. One of my intentions, one of my sexual intentions for this year is to add more self pleasure. I haven't been doing a lot of that lately. Last year was extremely busy for me. I traveled a lot, and a lot of the travel that I did last year was without my partner. I was also, stretched thin with some family stuff, taking care of, my grandmother, and somewhere in all of that, self pleasure just wasn't on the radar. It just kind of fell off. And for me, it is a vital part of self care. Self pleasure is self care for me. And for the record, partnered sex is not a substitute for masturbation. And masturbation is not a substitute for partnered sex. They're two different things. They serve two different purposes. Even if, feeling good is the primary intention, self-pleasure and partnered sex are just different. And for me, I keep saying that because this isn't true for everybody. So for me, self-pleasure is one of the ways that I stay connected to my own body, to my desire, to my pleasure. It is not about my partner. It's, not about connecting with another person. It's about me giving time and pleasure to myself. It is just for me, totally selfish. I get to have that. Now, sometimes my partner gets to benefit. He gets to benefit from my self-pleasure, but ultimately, self-pleasure is about me. So that's one of my intentions for this year, is to have more of that. So if you want to set some sexual intentions of your own, I recommend you getting really specific. So you don't want to just be like, oh, I want to have better sex. That's vague. Like, better how? Better when? Better with whom? Right? Very vague. So you need to ask yourself some real questions so that you can be really clear with yourself about what it is you really want. And in case you don't know where to start, I got you. First question: what kind of sex do you want to have this year? And I want you to actually describe it. Do you want slow, sensual sex? Do you want playful sex? Do you want adventurous sex? Like, maybe you want to try some new things. Do you want familiar sex? Like, do you want the kind of sex where you know exactly what you're doing, who you're doing it with, and what works? Like, is that what you're after? And there's no right answer here. But you have to know what you actually want, not what you think you're supposed to want. And that's what these questions are for. So that's question number one. What kind of sex do you want to have this year? Question number two: how often do you want to have sex? And with whom? Just with you? With your partner? Both? And this isn't about setting a quota. Like, this is just so that you can be honest. If you want to have sex with your partner twice a week, say that. And if you want to prioritize self-pleasure a few times a week, say that. And if you don't care about the frequency, but you care about the quality, say that. Okay? Question number three: what needs to shift internally for you to show up more fully during sex? Now, that's a big one. Like, so what gets in your way? Is it mental load? Is it resentment, distraction, performance anxiety, body image stuff? Like, what would it look like to actually be present during sex instead of thinking about your to-do list or worrying about how you look or whether your partner is enjoying themselves? So again, what needs to shift internally for you to show up more fully during sex? Next question: what's one thing you want to try? Maybe it's a position or a new location. Maybe you want to have a conversation you've been avoiding, or ask for something that you want instead of hinting at it or hoping that your partner will figure it out. So what's one thing, just one thing, that you want to try? Next question: what's one thing you want to let go of? This is important. Like, what are you doing in your sex life that doesn't serve you anymore? Like, what are you holding on to out of obligation or habit or fear? Maybe it's faking enthusiasm. That's no bueno. Everyone can feel authenticity, so don't do that. If you're doing that, that's something you could let go of. Or, maybe it's having sex when you don't want to. Also, no bueno. It's And this is an episode for another day, but there are times when you have sex for your partner's pleasure, but that's not the same as having sex when you don't want to. Again, that's a topic for another day, but I just wanted to make that distinction. Maybe Maybe you've been avoiding conversations about what's not working. So, again, what needs to stop? What's one thing that you want to let go of? Next question. What conversations do you need to have? And do you need to have a conversation with you, with your partner? To put it another way, what have you been avoiding admitting or saying out loud? That's the last question. So, what conversations do you need to have? These questions might feel uncomfortable, and that's the point. That's the point because discomfort means that you're getting somewhere. And you don't have to answer all of these questions right now, like maybe you're driving or on a walk or whatever. But I do want you to sit with them, and I created a worksheet. It's in the show notes. If you are listening to this on Substack, it is in this post. But anyway, I want you to sit with these questions because that's where you start. Because you cannot set an intention for something that you haven't actually thought about. Now, I want to talk about what you control versus what needs a buy in, because this is where sometimes people get stuck. There are some intentions that are entirely yours, and other intentions that require your partner to participate. So let me just get clear about what you can control. You control how present you are during sex. You also control your own self pleasure practice. You control whether you initiate or not. You control what you communicate, so what you talk about, what you let go of, and also the internal shifts that you make or need to make. You don't need anyone's permission for these. You just do them. Now, there are some things that require a partner's buy in. So, frequency, you can want to have sex twice a week, but your partner might not. You can want to try new things together, but your partner has to buy into that. Where or when you have sex also requires a partner's buy in, and any changes to your dynamic that affect both of you need to be discussed with your partner. So, those things need a conversation. They might require some negotiation, definitely some agreement. And as uncomfortable as this may be to hear, your partner might not want the same things that you want. You might want more sex, they might want less. You might want to try new things, they might be perfectly happy with what you're already doing. And that doesn't mean that you don't set the intention. It just means that you also have to set the intention to be willing to talk about it. So if you are in a relationship, this these questions and this worksheet could be a joint activity, at least for the parts that involve both of you. So I recommend that you do the worksheet separately first, each of you. Maybe both of you sit down and answer the questions honestly. Don't worry about what the other person is thinking and don't edit yourself to make it easier. You want to be real about what you want, and then you come together and share. This isn't a negotiation yet, though. At first, this is just an exchange of information. So basically, it's here's what I want, here's what you want. Let's see where there's an overlap and where we don't, right? It's important to know that you can't work together on your sex life if you don't know what each other wants. And that's why this is important. Most of us spend way too much time guessing and trying to figure it out without actually talking about it. We think we know what our partners want, but we haven't actually asked. So, this is an opportunity to ask. And then you can figure out what you can do together and what you need to compromise on and what might not be possible right now, what might not be possible yet. You know, I'm not saying that no isn't a no. Sometimes no is a no. But when you are having conversations, you can see where there might be some room in the future and you can talk about it, right? The conversation might be awkward, and that's okay because it is until it isn't, and practice makes better. You are not trying to convince each other. You're just trying to understand, like, your wants and needs and desires and the other person's wants, needs, and desires. So you wanna be, finding a place where there, again, is some overlap, some alignment, and you wanna acknowledge the places where it's just feeling like a mismatch right now. People change, so our desires change. So it might not be set in stone. However, if you or your partner are a hard no on something, you got to honor that. Okay, so you're setting intentions. Good. Now let me tell you about some ways that you could fuck this up. There are ways that it can get fucked up. So I want to just touch on some pitfalls. So if you are setting intentions based on what you think you should want instead of what you actually want, that's not great because you might think that you should want wild, adventurous sex because that's what the internet says good sex looks like, right? But maybe what you actually want is slow, familiar sex where you don't have to think too much, or vice versa. So stop shitting all over yourself. Just be clear about what you actually want. Another potential pitfall is being too vague. Again, like I said earlier, I want better sex. That's not an intention, that's a wish. Because again, better how? What would that look like in practice? What would you be doing differently? You need to be specific. Another pitfall is making it all about your partner. I want my partner to initiate more. Okay, but what are you going to do? You cannot control what your partner does. You can only control what you do. So we need to reframe that. Maybe you could say, I'm going to communicate more clearly about what I want, or I'm going to initiate more often myself. So you want to make sure that you are taking care of your own side of the street. Another potential pitfall is setting intentions you have no plan to follow through on. And this is the conundrum, right, of the new year. Resolutions and intentions that you're not going to follow through on. We don't want to do that because, one, we do not want to train our brains to not believe us, right? You do not want to create disbelief within yourself because you don't do what you say you're going to do. So, this isn't just about writing down what you want and hoping it magically happens. You have to actually do something. If your intention is to have more sex, what needs to change? When will it happen? What's getting in the way right now that you need to address? So don't just set the intention and think that it's actually going to just happen without your buy in. You have to be buying in too, right? So you need to really think about what it will take to make it real. And if you don't feel like you have the bandwidth or the capacity, then don't set the intention right now. You can circle back another time. Last pitfall, avoiding the hard stuff. If your intention is to have more sex, but you're avoiding the conversation with your partner about why you're not having sex in the first place, then you're skipping the most important part. Don't set intentions that paper over the real problem. So if there is some conversations to be had before you can set the intention, I don't know, to be more sexually open with your partner. If there's a conversation that needs to be had to make that possible, you'll need to do that. Okay? Okay, we're almost done. Write it down. Here's why this matters. And I might have talked about this before. So if I'm being redundant, it's because it's important. Writing things down is so important because when you write something down by hand, I'm not talking about typing, you are more likely to follow through. There is something about the physical act of putting pen or pencil to paper that makes it real. It's not just in your head anymore. Like it's out there. It's in tangible form now. So you don't just think about your sexual intentions. I want you to write them down. And if you are partnered, you can each write them down separately and then share. Again, all the questions that I mentioned earlier are in a worksheet in the show notes or on the Substack post for this episode. So print it out, fill it in, and go over it with your partner if you're partnered. Either way, keep it somewhere you'll see it, so you can refer back to it. It doesn't have to be like on your bathroom mirror. It could be like on a bulletin board, over your desk. I'm saying that because I'm looking at the bulletin board over my desk, and that's typically where I put my intentions. Don't skip writing it out. Don't skip writing it out because, intentions don't mean anything if we forget about them a week later or 2 months later or whatever, as is not uncommon for New Year's resolutions and things, but you want to follow through. You want to do what you say you're going to do. So write it down, put it somewhere that you can glance at it at least once a week. And lastly, because I'm nosy and also because I shared one too, I would love to know what your sexual intentions are. Maybe just one. And not because, well, yes, I'm voyeuristic and nosy, like I said, but also because I think that there is power in naming something that you want out loud. So if you are willing to share, I'd love for you to head over to the Substack post for this episode and leave a comment with one of your intentions. Just one. You don't have to share all your business, but just one. It doesn't have to be like the most vulnerable, the deepest one. It doesn't have to be that. Just share something. Because again, when you say it out loud, there is power in that, but there is also something to be said about sharing something that helps it become real. And maybe someone else will read what your intention is and think like, "Oh, I didn't think about that, but I think I might want that too." Or, "I didn't know I was allowed to want that." Right? So, if you're willing, and I hope you are, share it on the post. So there we have it. Again, we set goals for everything else in our lives, but your sex life, that's just supposed to happen, right? Nope. Nope. Your sexuality deserves the same intention and attention you give to everything else that matter. So figure out what you want. Get specific, write it down. And if you're partnered, have the conversation. Not someday, not when things get better. Now is as great a time as any. Actually, now is all the time there is. So do it now. Because this year is going to pass whether you're intentional about your sex life or not. You might as well make it count. Next week, we are going to be talking about, I don't want to say it's heavy. It can be. It can be because we're going to be talking about sickness, surgeries, and sex. And what happens to your sex life when you or your partner is in recovery mode? Like, how do you stay connected when sex isn't possible? And how do you keep your own sexuality alive when one or both of you is in recovery, right? Real talk, real situations, none of the stuff people usually avoid. That's what we're doing here. So I'll see you next week. Ciao.